how to jump higher. Now, a lot of players get the misconception that the only way to jump higher is by lifting a ton of weights and doing a ton of plyometrics. Now, don't get me wrong, those are going to help you improve your vertical jump over time, but there's only one way to instantly jump higher, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. But that's not all. Stick around to the end of this video. I have a special gift that I'm going to give to you. It's our brand new vertical jump training software. It's called the Vertical Jump Analyzer. It's going to show you how much higher you are capable of jumping right now. It's 100% free. Like I said, stick around. I'm going to show you how to get instant access to that. But first, I'm going to show you how to jump higher, so let's get into it. So the only way to jump higher instantly is by fixing your jump technique. We're going to break down technique into two separate phases so it's much easier for you to understand. We have the approach, which is also known as your run up, and then we have the takeoff. The approach is the most important aspect of your jump. It's about 90% of your jump, and the same principles apply to both 1 foot and 2 foot jumpers when it comes to the approach. Now, unfortunately for the approach, it usually always gets overlooked. I mean, think about it to yourself right now. How many times have you ever practiced your approach? Probably never. So don't worry, we're going to cut out the mistakes in your approach, we're going to add the fixes, and you should instantly see some gains on your vertical jump today. First, let's cover the 3 biggest mistakes that most players make when it comes to their approach. Now, mistake number 1 is stutter stepping. Stutter stepping is when you take way too many steps in the beginning, those short, choppy steps. You do not want to do this. What stutter stepping does is it causes deceleration and the inability to build repetition. So every time you jump from a stutter step, every time you approach with a stutter, it's going to be hard to get comfortable because every time you approach, it's going to be a different approach. You won't stutter the same every single time. So we want to remove the stutter step completely. The next mistake that we want to remove from our approach is deceleration, aka slowing down. Now, what happens when you jump, when you go from your approach into your takeoff, you want as much speed as possible, which we call the MCV, your maximum controlled velocity. You want as much speed that you can handle. You want to take that horizontal speed vertical. Now, if you decelerate, which a lot of players do, they start off too fast, and by the time they take off, they slow down and they have zero power when they get into their takeoff. So in the approach, you want an acceleration, not a deceleration. You want to get faster as you go. You don't want to slow down. Now, the third and final mistake of the approach that we're going to discuss in this video is too much forward lean. So what happens is a lot of players, when they're in their approach and they're attacking the basket, they have their chest pointed at the ground. So what this does is when you get to your takeoff, and we're going to talk about this more as a takeoff mistake, but this takeoff mistake begins in the approach. Too much forward lean, you end up jumping horizontally and you end up going where your chest is at. So if your chest is pointing at the ground, you're going forward instead of jumping straight up. Now let's get into the approach fixes so you can start fixing your approach and start adding instant inches to your vertical jump. Now, whether you're a 1 foot jumper or a 2 foot jumper, both of these approaches have very similar principles. Now, the biggest difference between a 1 foot approach and a 2 foot approach is that a 2 foot approach is going to be maybe a few steps shorter than your 1 foot approach. But other than that, the approaches are going to be almost identical. Now, let's talk about some keys to having a good approach. Now, the first thing you want to make sure you're doing in your approach is running with dorsiflexion. Now, I know that's a big word, but don't let that big word scare you. It might be foreign to you, but all dorsiflexion is when your toes are pointed towards your shins. What this is going to do is assure that you're running on the balls of your feet. So we have plantar flexion and we have dorsiflexion. Now, you can see how powerful my foot is when using plantar flexion, and then you can see how powerful and how fast my foot is when I use dorsiflexion. And I love to use the analogy of pretend you're punching somebody. Now, are you going to punch somebody with your fingertips or are you going to punch them with your fists? Now, plantar flexion is kind of like punching with fingertips, while dorsiflexion is like punching with your fists. The ball of your foot is probably the most powerful part of your entire
body. So we want to be running with all that power, all that explosiveness. We want to be using it as we run in our approach, generating all that force through the ground to get a faster approach and get a more powerful takeoff as well. So remember, you want to run and jump with dorsiflexion. So the next fixes to the approach are going to be to fix those mistakes that I mentioned earlier, especially number 2 and number 3. We got to fix the forward lean. We want a more upright torso. We want our chest up, head up. A great hack for this is just look up at the rim, and that's going to ensure that your head is up, your chest is up. And what this does is it gives you the ability to control your momentum better. So when you take all that speed horizontal to vertical, you're taking it vertical and not going too far forward. Next, we want a good accelerated approach. So we're not going to slow down, but we're going to speed up during the approach so that we're hitting our maximum controlled velocity right at the takeoff. So the more speed and power you can control and take into your takeoff, the higher you're going to jump. And that leads us right into the takeoff. So now let's talk about the takeoff. Now with the 1 foot takeoff and the 2 foot takeoff, there are again a lot of similarities, but this time there are a few differences. But first, let's address the mistakes and how to fix them. Now when it comes to mistakes with the takeoff, many of the mistakes occur from the mistakes in the approach. So let's take forward lean for example. If you have too much forward lean in your approach, then that's going to happen in your takeoff. Your body will collapse during the takeoff and you'll jump too far forward. That's why we don't want forward lean. Instead, we want a tall approach, tall takeoff where our chest is up, head is up, and that allows us to control our body better so we can take all of our momentum vertical instead of horizontal. Another mistake, which again comes from the approach, is deceleration in the takeoff. Remember, your takeoff, you want it to be the point at where you're fastest. So you want the beginning of your approach the slowest, and then at that moment of takeoff, you want that to be the fastest. And the way to ensure that this happens is by having what we call a quick penultimate step. Now this is where things get a little bit different between the 1 foot takeoff and the 2 foot takeoff. But first, let's talk about what the penultimate is. Now the penultimate step are those last 2 steps that you take in your takeoff. So you want those last 2 steps to be fast and explosive. Now with our 2 foot takeoff, we're going to use an elongated third to last step. And what this is going to do is it's going to force us to cycle our feet through, ensuring that we have a quick penultimate step. So as you can see, I have a really long third to last step, and now watch how fast my penultimate has to be. So that's what it does right there. That third to last step, when it's long, it forces you to cycle those last 2 steps in and helps you take all that horizontal momentum vertical. Now things don't change too much with the 1 foot. Again, we want a quick penultimate. There is no elongated third step, so that's the biggest difference. But again, we want to accelerate through our entire approach, snap in those last 2 quick steps, that penultimate step, keep that foot more underneath your body, not too far out in front of you, so that your leg has a slight bend, not a huge bend, and take off from there. Now let's go through one quick rundown of everything so you can take this, implement it into your vertical jump right now, and start jumping higher right now. I know I went over a lot of things, but it's really not that difficult. You want to stay tall. You want to use dorsiflexion when you run, when you jump. Use dorsiflexion. You want to accelerate all the way through from the beginning of your approach all the way into your takeoff. You want to get faster and faster, and you need a quick penultimate so you can transfer all that horizontal speed vertical.
So there you have it. If you master your approach and you master your takeoff, you are instantly going to jump higher. It's all about fixing your vertical jump technique. So we covered how you can instantly jump higher today, but as promised, here's access to the vertical jump analyzer. Click this button right here. That's going to take you to a page. It's just going to ask you a few questions. You put in your answers, and it's going to analyze your vertical jump and show you how much higher you are capable of jumping right now. If you're on any mobile device, that button's not going to work for you. Just go to the first link in the description, freaktraining.com/VJA, and that's going to take you to that same exact page, those same exact questions. You've put in your answers, and it's going to analyze your vertical jump and show you how much higher higher you're capable of jumping today. Do me a favor though, after you analyze your vertical jump, come back to this video, comment below, let me know how many inches you're capable of jumping, and then let me know if you tried some of these drills. Did they help you? Did the techniques, did they help you jump higher? If they did, comment below, let me know how much higher you're jumping. I'm sure we're going to have a ton of results from a lot of different players. I can't wait to see the results that you're going to have. As always, subscribe to our channel, I Love Basketball TV. We're going to have a lot more vertical jump videos coming in the next few days, so stick around. You're definitely going to be jumping higher.